very good at creating inclusive economic growth, inclusive of the poor, inclusive of the persons with disability, inclusive of youth, and inclusive of women. That is what we're paid to do, and that's what we do. But it appears that in the profession itself, inclusiveness is a bit of a problem. And the reason for this is usually unconscious bias. This is what I'm discussing with two fantastic guests today. Welcome. Hello, welcome to Dev TV. As you all know, we profile ideas, innovations, and individuals doing amazing things in economic development. Today's topic is a special one, or today's broadcast is a special one, because I have two fantastic guests here to discuss a very serious issue with me. And my hope is that you will get involved in this conversation and contribute so we can share ideas and share experiences to move our sector forward. We're focusing today on development as a sector. We're focusing on the inclusiveness that appears to be lacking or perhaps weak in development. So this particular broadcast was inspired by an open letter that was sent by one of my guests. She will tell us about it in a few minutes, but this is such an important topic, and especially because of the recent election in the United States and how United States appears to be pushing in terms of inclusiveness. So we ought to try and do the same in economic development. So my first guest then is an inclusion warrior. She has worked in very senior positions across Africa, Asia, and now she's in Balkans. She's a team leader of a youth employment project in the Balkans. Her name is Clara, and please welcome Clara. Hi, Clara.
Hi, Alhavi. Thank you so much for having us on the channel.
Thank you for joining me. Thank you. It's an honor to have you here. My second guest then is an economist by training. She's had amazing experiences across development sector. She works with the implementing companies, and she effectively set agendas for what people like me do. Please join me and welcome Nok. Hello.
Hi, Habib. Hello, Clara.
How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Excellent.
Thanks for having us on the channel.
No, thank you. Thank you for gracing us with your presence. So this topic then, what I thought we should start with is, okay, what is the nature of inclusiveness in economic development as a profession? And how is it that you can have unconscious bias? I struggle with that phrase, unconscious bias. Can bias be unconscious, or is it just we're trying to spin a deliberate bias? What do you think, Clara?
That is a very important question because it makes reflect about what our biases, conscious or unconscious, may be, and if we try to be better people and better professionals, what we can do to unravel them and address them. So I think, as you said in the introduction, the question is timely, not only in our industry where it is particularly important because of the nature of the work we do, but across the globe. So what are the unconscious biases that we all have to identify within ourselves and try to address? So yeah, great question. I don't know.
Nok, what do you think?
So I think if we look around ourselves and in the kind of projects we work in or we know of, I think a lot of the projects are seen to be led by male team leaders, and then the number of sort of female team leaders in these positions is quite small. Similarly, in most of the knowledge products, big reports, important reports, for example, are written by men, or they are promoted as by men. We have also seen on many occasions, for example, in speakers for seminars, for things like that, there's a larger number of male speakers rather than sort of female colleagues being invited to also speak or provide inputs in these events. So so that also, that is at the kind of, that's what a lot of us see in the daily life. So in terms of like through our work, we know that there are a lot of qualified female practitioner, but for some reason, in reality, not a lot of people are seen publicly, either in leadership position or as speakers or as authors. And the reason we are here today is to discuss, whether these issues are part of the design of these projects or organizations, or are they part of the behavior, or as in are people actually unconsciously uninviting or not giving women a seat at the table?
You see, that's the interesting bit for me, the unconscious bit. Do you, okay, how can it be unconscious if you have a panel of 4 or 5 professionals, and you in the work would have come across a lot of adequately qualified and people that are competent enough to speak of whatever it is that you're putting up in a seminar? How is it that that is unconscious? You spoke about dominated by men. So how is it that men just naturally, unconsciously assume that it's okay to just have men and not women on a panel or in a senior position, or how is that unconscious? That's the bit I'm struggling with.
If I may, just like a first thought about that is that really, truly, some people just don't see it. And it's crazy and it's strange, but it is true. And that's why I don't think blaming or naming and shaming is necessarily always the best strategy. So the first step needs to be to kind of educate, raise awareness, identify instances where this is happening, and just hope that the people who are perpetuating these practices at one point realize, because I want to believe that people are not mean by nature, realize that they themselves play a role in the possibilities of change. So beyond the fact that it is hard when you've been raised in a spirit of white male privilege to see that you may need to make room and be aware that there is other people who are also qualified to participate in different events. So despite the fact that people are very conditioned and raised like that, there is room, I think, to just signal it and fight until the default is just that people don't just go with their default solution, but just think twice before organizing, for example, a webinar where all speakers are male.
No, what do you think? Do you agree with that? Do you think it's unconscious and people just don't think about these things, and perhaps they're too wrapped up in what the subject matter is and whatever it is that they're doing, so they forget to think about all of these other sort of like inclusive type approaches to things?
Yes, I think that all of us have some degree of unconscious bias, and we potentially think, exhibit them in different ways. So I think the key thing here is potentially to be aware that we all have those biases and work to reduce, or change the behavior where that leads to these things. So we could kind of provide, perhaps if it's helpful, to provide some example of, if we think about the cycle of a person into a project or into an organization, from the kind of attraction stage to the recruitment stage to the learning and development stage to the promotion progression stage, for example, at all those stages, people experience unconscious bias, and therefore we could then sort of go into a little bit more details in terms of how women are unconsciously biased against in those particular stages. So, we could kind of, if that's all right, we can kind of, spend a few more minutes talking about these different aspects.
Yes, please. Yes, please. It'd be nice.
Yeah. So maybe building on what Nog said, I would like to start with like the very first reason why most of us get into development. And the answer is not to stay in an office in other countries pushing papers. So usually when one decides to get into development, it's because they're after a certain interest in making an impact, in learning from implementing projects that have a purpose, learning from doing work in countries that face different challenges. So really, the main attraction of this industry to a young person is fieldwork at the end of the day. And obviously there will be exceptions, but and most of what I think I'm going to say 8 years of experience in development. Mostly people get into it because of the opportunities that fieldwork presents. Now, this applies obviously both to men and women. And then you start, and when you start as a junior person in an organization, you realize that it's a sector that generally tends to attract more women than men. So between that initial attraction and then the fact that you look at senior field job specs, and most of them are manned by men, something must happen in between. And I think that it starts with the attraction of people into the field. So I recently read a study that I really recommend everyone to read. It's by Holly Kruger and a team of people from the Canopy Lab. And it's very interesting because they went through over 60 job specs from USAID programs over the past 2 years. And what they found is that these job specs for senior positions in the field all emphasize technical experience requirements over other types of experience that could be much more inclusive of women candidates. So if instead of requiring 10 years of technical experience in a very technical field, a job spec favors things like ease of adapting to change, curiosity, communication, listening, then those profiles of people mainly managing market systems programs may start to change. So that would be one thing where we see that there is a bit of a difference in the recruitment stage, the attraction stage.
Yeah. And then Sonia, like if you move on at the recruitment stage, you can also see that unconscious bias at play from kind of the composition of interview panels, for example. For a job in a project or an organization tend to be more composed of more male than female. And this is perhaps that there tend to be more men in senior positions in an organization, either that be a project or again a company. So that automatically excludes some people already or intimidate certain people when they have to come to the interview. The other thing, I think as I said earlier, I think unconscious bias sort of happens. We all have it, and for a lot of us, it happens within the first few seconds of the interview. A lot of people refer to this as kind of first impression. People are sometimes nervous, but people almost make up their mind within the first few seconds of that, whether or not they think this person is suitable for the position. Working in development, we also see, for example, that lots of international colleagues will likely be disadvantaged for not speaking it as a first language. So there's always a confidence level aspect there.
I say that things like this, like the very conversation that we're having, are a step in the right direction. Because as I said at the beginning, I don't believe that a lot of this bias is conscious. So I don't believe that it comes from an evil design to exclude competent women from senior positions. I think it just comes, as you said, from like maybe feeling more comfortable with certain interlocutors, with assumptions as well, actually, that in developing countries, men have it easier than women, which may or may not be unfounded in certain ways in terms of engaging with senior institutions, with different counterparts. So there is a lot that may come into play in these informal preferences for males. But then, and I know it's a tricky one, because at the end of the day, donors are our clients, and we also need to understand what they want and try to give it to them. But everything starts with dialogue and with just creating enough evidence, for example, as the Canopy Lab have done with this study, to try to show the extent of the problem. So I would say that is definitely a step in the right direction, as is this discussion.
Mark?
I agree with Clara. I think Clara is absolutely correct, that the fact that we are, and that you are hosting this, and that we are talking about this, we are not going to expect behavior change is not going to happen overnight. So it's going to be one of the small contribution to then gradually change the way people think. And again, donors are also individuals. They compose of a set of individuals. So the more people are aware that unconscious bias takes place, it is, the better it will be.
Fantastic. I mean, just before I close this, I mean, you guys have been incredibly generous with your time. It's over 30 minutes now. Is there any aspect of this that I may have missed that we have not covered that you think is crucial to mention?
I think the key thing is we just need to, I think as human beings, we all have flaws, and we ourselves also have unconscious bias, and we just need to know that these things are there, and that we are aware of it. Therefore, we will try to reduce our behavior, our body language, the way we speak, the way we treat people, to make sure that we include more people into our sector, and that applies to me as much as it applies to anybody else.
Yeah, I agree, because I don't want to put labels on this discussion, but if we talk about feminism, which this is part of, feminism is not just the advancement of women, it's also very much linked with other intersectional questions, So the bias that we're discussing now of males versus females also applies in us as females, between whites and other colleagues that we could be championing, right? And the struggles of different women will be very different depending on where they're from and on what their environment is. So for me, that is one issue that is important to keep in mind. And then the other thing is also more proactively, besides of the leadership that is essential, it's also maybe coming up with solutions for our employers, not the donors, but our companies, and trying to change policies in the sense of ingraining within company policy that, for example, no one attends manuals or no one participates in a manual. And I know for a fact some of my friends are telling me that their companies are already doing that. Because it's not only about shouting angrily, it's also about making change happen. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
No, thank you very much. Thank you to both of you, and thank you for sparing the time, and thank you for educating us on this issue. My major takeaway from here is the constant repetition that you did of the fact that all of us have unconscious biases, and it's in really thinking about those biases and how it manifests itself at the individual level, at the company level, and at the donor level, that we may begin to change the way we treat each other within economic development. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time. I appreciate the education, and I hope both of you you come back to Dev TV to grace us with your intellectual prowess and especially experiences. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you so much, Habib. It was fun.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Habib. Yeah.
Thanks.
Bye
Hello,
now.
there you have it. So that's those are two incredible women that have just educated us on exactly what it is that we can do to make international economics and economic development a lot better, and at the donor level, at the implementing company level, and at an individual level. I hope you find this useful. Please leave comments below, whatever your opinion on this matter is, and if you have any other suggestions, please leave them in the comment below. And see you next Sunday. Thank you very much.